Every year, there are a handful of movies I see that I like well enough, or at least find interesting enough, that I want to talk about them, but not quite enough to justify a full 10-15 minute breakdown on the channel. They're the films that didn't spark a whole essay in my brain, but still deserve a little space, a little attention, a little moment in the spotlight. So today, I'm doing a kind of rapid fire roundup, quick thoughts on some of the 2025 releases that I never got around to covering in depth on the channel. Think of this as a little bit of a catch-up session. All the movies that slipped through the cracks gathered up into one place. This is part 3 of what I'm calling I Saw These, I Promise. You can check out my first 2 editions. They're all coming out in December so that I can get through all of the movies that I didn't talk about on the channel in 2025. So without further ado, let's get into it. Boy, oh boy, do I have thoughts on this movie. Major spoilers for this film if you have not seen it, though I think a lot of us have probably seen it by now. Unfortunately, I don't think I was a very big fan of this. While it has some really high highs that I'll get into in a minute, it also has some of the lowest lows in the entire Mission Impossible franchise. For starters, there's not a lot of action in this movie, at least not for a while. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and it takes about 45 minutes to an hour before we get our first real action set piece. Up until then, it's mostly just characters moving from point A to point B to point C to point D. It also has this problem where it feels like one long in case you forgot recap of earlier films, especially in the first 70 minutes. Even later on, there are callbacks that feel hollow and don't really affect the plot. For example, spoiler alert, Shea Wiggum's character is revealed to be the son of John Voight's character from the first Mission Impossible movie. That's just a random detail to throw in at the last minute, and it doesn't really go anywhere, so why even include it? Another big issue I have with this movie is how it handles exposition. It constantly explains things that don't need explaining. It reminds me of that article that came out not long ago explaining how some streaming movies and TV shows are written so that you could follow along while doing other things. They make everything painfully obvious so you could zone out and have it on in the background as a second screen. Here, characters over-explain every single thing. Here's an example of how almost all of the dialogue in this movie sounds to me. Okay guys, today we're gonna go outside and have a picnic in the grass. The grass? You mean that green stuff that comes out of the ground? Precisely. But Ethan, have you considered whether it will rain today? You mean moisture that becomes condensed from the atmosphere and falls visibly in separate drops from the sky? Not a chance. There's even a real life example from the movie when someone says, this server has 10 exabytes of storage. We don't need someone to chime in and say, that's a billion gigabytes. It's just unnecessary. We get it. It's a lot of storage. That happens a lot here, and it gets really grating. I also found that the emotional beats in this fell pretty flat. Luther dies early on in the film, but it doesn't feel like a big deal. We barely see anyone react, and even Ethan doesn't dwell on it for too long. You'd think that the death of a character who's been in the series since the beginning would carry more weight. The stakes also feel oddly low for a movie about preventing global extinction via rogue AI. For all the buildup about nuclear codes and humanity's survival, the tension never really escalates after Luther's death. It sort of plateaus, and there's no sense of real peril for Ethan or the team. Even the ending feels off. Benji gets shot during the final set piece, and then there's some ambiguity about whether or not he survives, but during the final moments, when the team comes back together at Trafalgar Square, they come out of the woodwork one by one in a cutesy little, we did it moment. And here's the thing. Why wasn't Benji the last one revealed? That's like storytelling 101. Not only was he mortally wounded in the preceding scene, so we don't even know if he survived, but you chose to have Haley Atwell's character be the big reveal and be the one to deliver the entity to Ethan. The lady that he met in the last movie. Not the guy who's been around since 2006. In the world of the movie, Ethan has known Grace for what, 4 months? And for 2 of those, he was in hiding somewhere. But no, we got to have Haley Atwell and Tom Cruise have a will they, won't they moment at the end there. Just bonkers decision making to me. Have Benji come around the corner so we could all clap and breathe a goddamn sigh of relief that he survived. Anyway, that's my rant on that. There's plenty more where that came from. Like, why do we have to get it beaten over our heads that Angela Bassett is the president? Seriously, they establish it early on. Ethan says, good to see you, Madam President, or whatever. Cool. Got it. She's the president. But then throughout the movie, every time we're back in the war room with her and her military people, she's like, I'm the commander in chief. I'm making the decisions. And then Hannah Waddingham's character even goes, did Erica, the president, give you this? We get it. She's the president. Okay, now I'm done. Let me get to the good stuff. The major set pieces are impressive in this. I could have told you that without even seeing the movie. The submarine sequence in particular is a standout to me. It's largely dialogue free, except for one dumb line that took me out of it completely. And it has Tom Cruise navigating this chaotic sinking and rolling submarine. It's pretty intense. It's creative and exactly what I go to a Mission Impossible movie for. Same goes for the biplane chase sequence. Legitimately, I was like, how did they even do this? But moments like these are surrounded by a lot of filler and clunky dialogue. At one point, Holt McCallany's character says, "That son of a bitch, he did it." And it's the kind of line that feels so lazy and unnecessary, in my opinion. It's like the cardinal sin of cinema. And look, I don't ever want to be overly cynical, but this one just did not work for me. Really great technical craftsmanship on display, but I can't overlook the many pitfalls and modern action movie trends this film falls into. However, major shout out to Tremel Tillman, who's always a delight, and this actor's name, who I'm not gonna butcher, her imitation of a polar bear was the only time in the film that made me laugh. I'll admit, I went into A House of Dynamite a little wary because you know how it goes. You start reading opinions online, and before you've even hit play, people are already trying to yuck your yum before you've had a chance to taste what a brilliant filmmaker has been cooking up. But I've got to say, this completely knocked me off my ass. It kept me glued to my couch from beginning to end. This film is propulsive, it's energetic, and it's packed with an incredible ensemble that carries the full emotional weight of what's happening. The premise is deceptively simple. It's a seemingly random day in Washington, D.C., when an unidentified nuclear missile is detected heading toward the United States. No one knows who sent it, why it was launched, or whether it's even real. The film unfolds in real time as a chain of command scrambles to figure out what's going on, what to do about it, and whether or not to retaliate as the missile closes in on Chicago. It's a pure lose-lose scenario. By the end, the choice comes down to two equally devastating options: strike back or surrender. This is the very definition of a ticking clock movie, but Bigelow adds a structural twist that gives it even more power. In a move similar to what Zach Kreger did with Weapons earlier this year, the film replays the same 30-minute window 3 different times from 3 different perspectives. First, we see the initial detection of the missile, then we shift to other key players, the Secretary of Defense, the President, and other figures in the chain of command, all reacting to the same unfolding event in their own ways. And Catherine Bigelow, as always, proves why she's one of the most accomplished filmmakers working today. The Hurt Locker remains one of my favorite films of the 21st century, though strangely, I think it's a film that's been somewhat forgotten, even though it won Best Picture. But what's undeniable is her command of tension. Bigelow has one of the most distinct visual styles of any director alive. You've got the handheld camera work, the sharp zooms into faces and control panels, the tight close-ups on clocks ticking down, and DEFCON alerts sliding from 4 to 2 to 1. The pulsing score ties it all together, creating a sense of dread that feels physical. It raises your heart rate, at least it raised mine. Movies like this are fascinating because they work as snapshots of procedure. They show how systems function under unimaginable pressure. But House of Dynamite is also a metaphor. The world itself is a house of dynamite that we built ourselves, always one wrong move away from collapse. It's a sort of hauntingly apt idea for the moment that we're currently living in, when everything feels sort of precarious and so combustible. What struck me most is how human the film is. Beneath all of the command centers and military jargon, the film keeps circling back to individuals. Every decision, every order, every possible act of retaliation, all of it comes down to people. People with families, people who are scared, people trying to weigh impossible moral questions in real time. And we like to imagine that those people in power possess some higher level of clarity or composure, that when the world starts to crack, there's someone steady at the helm who knows exactly what to do. But this reminds us that in the end, the people making those impossible calls are just as human as the rest of us. They're just as flawed, just as uncertain, just as afraid. They might wear the suits, they might hold the titles, they might sit behind the polished tables, but inside, they're still people trying to keep their hands from shaking. And Bigelow doesn't treat these figures as faceless authority. She treats them as human beings, caught in a nightmare of responsibility. At one point, a character turns to his colleague and says, "What do we do now?" And his colleague says, "Look, there's no plan C. We've done A and B. We're out of options." It's chilling, really. It distills the film's central truth. Sometimes even the people in charge have no answers left. Sometimes leadership is nothing more than the illusion of control. And that's what makes A House of Dynamite a horror film in its own right. We tend to define horror through its creatures and its shadows, but the real horror here is systemic. It's procedural, it's bureaucratic, and it's all too human. It's the horror of realizing that the systems we've built to keep us safe are still run by people who panic, people who argue, people who are late to work, people who freeze when the pressure becomes unbearable. And there's a recognition here that civilization, with all of its protocols and chain of command diagrams, can be undone by one misread radar blip or one emotional decision made because someone didn't get enough sleep the night before. This is also a film about the limits of preparation, about how even with the best technology, the most seasoned advisors, and decades of hypothetical drills, there's still no blueprint for the real thing. The cast, in my opinion, is uniformly excellent. Rebecca Ferguson, Idris Elba, Tracy Letts, my man, Anthony Ramos, Jared Harris, Greta Lee, and a handful of other great character actors. Everyone brings this quiet desperation that keeps the tension alive through the entire runtime. In my opinion, Catherine Bigelow has done it again, and I know I might be kind of alone in that opinion. Does House of Dynamite reach the same heights as, say, The Hurt Locker? Maybe not, but that's a pretty high bar to clear, and this film is aiming for something different anyway. It's not about the chaos of combat, it's about the paralysis of decision making, the fear that comes with knowing that any move you make might doom millions, if not more. And for that reason alone, I think this movie deserves to be seen. If you put this movie in front of anyone, I honestly think it'd be hard for them to look away. This one I had really high hopes for. I've been a big fan of what Edward Berger has been doing these past few years. All Quiet on the Western Front completely knocked my socks off. Then he followed that up with Conclave last year, which I thought was a big success and really cemented him as a filmmaker to watch. So when I saw the trailer for The Ballad of a Small Player with Colin Farrell playing a gambling addict in Macau, I thought, oh boy, we've got another winner on our hands. But after watching it, I'm a bit more mixed than I wanted to be. And from what I could tell online, that seems to be the general consensus. Right off the bat, this film feels incredibly unfocused. Its tension comes less from any specific conflict and more from a general depiction of gambling addiction told through this one character who's on the lam. He's changed his identity and he's living in Macau, losing money, making money, reliving this endless cycle. And normally, gambling movies have a very palpable tension. Think of Rounders, The Gambler, California Split, or Hard Eight. Really, any film that features a poker table. Those movies know how to raise your blood pressure. Oddly enough, the tension here doesn't really come from the gambling itself. Instead, the film keeps introducing new threads that seem like they'll pivot the story in a new direction. Early on, we meet Dao Ming, a bookie or loan shark who works for a casino and offers credit to Colin Farrell's character. It feels like this will become a two-hander between them, but then another thread appears. Tilda Swinton plays a private investigator who's been tracking Farrell because he stole money from an elderly woman he worked for and then disappeared. And that's not all. He also owes money to the hotel he's been living in, and they give him 3 days to come up with the cash or face arrest. All these different pressures close in on him, and on their own, each of them could make for a full movie. A man on the run from his past, a man with 3 days to pay off a debt, a man trapped by his addiction, but Ballad of a Small Player struggles to focus on any one thread. Instead, it becomes a kind of tone poem, a visual experience that's one note in its depiction of gambling addiction. And to this film's credit, it is gorgeous to look at. Everyone's going to be talking about the cinematography and Colin Farrell's performance. The look of the movie is a warm relief compared to so many others that share this washed-out modern palette. This one is vibrant, it's sweaty, it's neon-soaked and acid-washed. It's full of wide angles and dynamic framing. Edward Berger clearly knows how to collaborate with cinematographers who have an eye for iconic imagery. There are several shots in here that could easily be among the best of 2025. And of course, it helps when you're shooting inside luxurious casinos and hotels in Macau, and when your lead is Colin Farrell, who spends the entire movie sweating through his suit, looking like he's on the verge of a heart attack. It actually reminded me a lot of All That Jazz with Roy Scheider, another film about a man visibly burning out in real time. Colin Farrell plays Lord Doyle with real passion, but the character itself feels a little underwritten, almost like a caricature of a gambling addict, lacking any sort of subtlety or nuance. But still, that doesn't take away from how raw and ferocious Farrell's performance is. Without getting too far into spoilers, the film leaves a lot open to interpretation, especially in its final 20 minutes. I've seen plenty of online discussions about what the ending means and what we're supposed to take away from it. I'm not going to speculate here, but I do want to mention what I call the Gentleman's Seven, or in this case, the Gentleman's Six. It's a film that might not blow you away, but it's still worth your time. Ballad of a Small Player definitely fits that description for me. It's visually stunning with strong performances and technical craft, but will it wow people in the way that audiences expect to be wowed in 2025? Probably not. Does it bring anything entirely new to the portrayal of gambling addiction? No, and while the film hints at deeper layers like Chinese folklore, the hungry ghost, stories that seem to symbolize Farrell's state of mind and fate, I don't think those ideas land as hard as the filmmakers hoped. The movie feels somewhat aimless for much of its runtime, and while the ending offers a sense of revelation, it comes with a whimper rather than a bang. Still, it's absolutely worth seeing for the visuals, the score, Farrell's performance, and for anyone planning to watch it, stick around through the end credits for a fun little dance number between Colin Farrell and Tilda Swinton. I also don't think this film should make anyone count out Edward Berger. Let me make that clear. We've gotten into this habit as a culture, as a society, of assuming that if a filmmaker releases something that isn't an awards contender, oh boy, their career is in trouble. Maybe that's true in some corners of the industry, but it shouldn't be. Edward Berger's got too much visual flair and technical control for this to be anything more than a mid-tier entry in an otherwise exciting career. And I can't wait to see what he does next. I'll be there day one for whatever it is. I'm going to keep this pretty short and sweet. I went into this really not expecting a heartwarming found family film about a predator, a hard-shelled monkey alien, and half a robot, but goddamn, am I glad that that's what we got. This was a pleasant surprise for sure, and proof that Dan Trachtenberg is really great at taking IP and crafting original world-building stories on top of them. It's a perfect blend of spectacle, action filmmaking, using existing tools from an often misused toolbox. And that's going to do it for part 3 of these mini reviews where I talk about films from 2025 that I haven't discussed on the channel yet. I'm glad that I'm doing this. I'm glad I'm able to get my thoughts about these movies out into the world and to you all. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with any of these opinions. Do you think I'm too harsh on Mission Impossible? Do you think I'm too harsh on Ballad of a Small Player? Do you think I'm too high on House of Dynamite? And what did you think of Predator Badlands? Let me know down in the comments. And when you're done down there, don't forget to like this video, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell to be notified when new videos come out on this very channel. Then you can go follow me over on Letterboxd so you can see what I'm watching when I'm watching it. Stay tuned for part 4 coming out next week. I'll see you all next time.